This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So, any questions before we can get started? Anyone who's trying something, not probably getting it, any questions as such that before I can, I can take before I can get started out here.
Hello, sir.
Good, please.
So yesterday I just did to create a reusable param block no, to upload
Okay.
all the data. So
Mm-hmm.
I tried using that, but I'm getting up to how to up to create a container, but not how to upload the data, sir, for
Okay.
image param.
Okay. So when you're saying, upload the data using the param block, inside the param block, are you passing the file path where, let's say, the file is situated in, or how is it?
Yeah, sir. I'm file path also, but if I want to upload the data from the folder which is stored in like the
Hmm.
where the power file stored no.
Okay.
From that folder I can upload the data, but from other folders I was unable to upload the data.
Okay. What exactly is the error that you're getting when you're trying to, let's say, upload the data from another folder as such?
Empty location not found like that. The do no data found in a folder location.
Okay, so can you help me with the same screenshot for the same thing? I just want to, let's say, take a look at, what exactly is the error that you're getting out there.
Okay, so sure.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any questions before I can get started with the session? Anyone, anything as such? Anything that I can take before I can get started with today's session out there? All right, so let's get started. Now, until now, what we've been doing right now is that we have been, let's say, going ahead using some kind of a param blocks. We went ahead, create the resources. So what I did is that I am now imagining that I am the user who's going ahead and passing, let's say, the names. I am, let's say, someone who's going ahead and, let's say, passing all the names and all these things out there. But what if I want a team to give me a configuration? Meaning, let's say you are a developer that's who's working in my organization, and I'm a DevOps engineer and I'm the administrator out here. I know how to write the PowerShell. I know, let's say, how to create or how to automate, let's say, the creation of resources and all these things out. Now, what you say is that as a developer, you go ahead and write some kind of a configuration out here, or you go ahead and, let's say, write some kind of a file out here. So my question to you as a developer would be like, how do you want to give me the file? Like, if you want to, let's say, go ahead, give me all the details, let's say, of the storage account or all these things out there. How exactly or in which format do you want to write the file? Anyone can take this question. In which format would you like to, let's say, go ahead and write the file out here? Do you want to write it in a text format? Do you want to write it in a Excel sheet? What exactly it is?
exe
Okay, sorry,
exe
it's an executable file. Now, why would you give me a configuration in an executable file? Why would I go ahead and execute that particular configuration? I'm just asking you for the details out there. Just the details, that's it.
What file?
No, no, I'm asking you that you give me a detail. So, what kind of a format do you want to like to write the detail? Meaning, do you want to write all these details in something like a text file? Let's say something like this. The team
Text file.
development. Exactly, text file. So I'll just go ahead write team as development. I'll say RG name that I need as a developer would be something like dev-rg. This is something that I need. I'll also say, let's say something like storage account name. I'll say this is dev storage ABC, something like this. And I would also say container name, it's just container, and file name, it's something.txt, meaning something that I want to upload. And I can also go ahead and give the file path, is where exactly is the file path and all these things out here. So I can go ahead give you the configuration in the form of a text file. This is one of the most simplest form that a human being can actually know. I'll say something like cd xyz or c drive or something like this, someplace in your computer out here, and I can save this out. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead save this entire file inside a folder called ATM file handle. So I'm just creating a folder out here, and I'll say yes. Okay, where to start new folder? Okay, lost it somewhere. So let me kind of again do this out. ATM file handling demo. And I'll just save this file as configuration.txt. So I have the files ready with me inside a file path called configuration.txt, and I give it to you as, let's say, a DevOps engineer. I go and give this file to you, telling that, okay, fine, you know what, I have this particular file, and if you click on this particular file, you'll get all this configuration. Now, what I want you to do, or what the organization wants you to do, is that can you read this file with a PowerShell script? So the question here is that can I read this file with a PowerShell script? Until now, we've been reading what are the contents inside a folder by using a get hyphen child item. We're going inside a folder, getting all the contents. But now I'm telling, can I read a file? But can I not only read a file, but can I get the contents of the file, like the
Get
team name,
child
like
item. Get item, child item.
get hyphen child item? Yes, but you cannot use a get hyphen child item to go inside the file and get the contents of the file. No, I'm now telling, can I read a file? Get hyphen child item is just, or it is used to just list all the contents that are there in a folder, but it doesn't go inside a file and read the content for you. No, it doesn't do that. So now I'm telling that, can I read a file? Yes. Can I get the contents of the file? Or can I, meaning when I say get the contents of the file, is that can I say what is the development team, or what is the name of the team, what is the name of the RG that I want to create, and then create the same thing on Azure portal? So now instead of me going ahead and, let's say, giving all the inputs, I am letting you as a developer, or you as a QA, or you as any other team of my organization to write the configuration in the form of a text document and send it across to me. So I can do that. So I'll say, let's save this file out here, and let's save this in the same path as I have the file out here. I'll say this is okay. So this is file handle.ps1 file. So now as a DevOps engineer, I am now starting to write, or I'm now starting to think on how do I read the file. And in order to read the file, I'll need to write a command called get hyphen content, meaning I need to get the content of a particular file, which is, let's say, ending with something like .txt. I'll say hyphen path, and I'll give the path. Right. So can you hear? I had a power outage, as someone said rightly. I had a power outage right now. So can you all hear me now? Okay.
Yes,
Okay, great. All right. So I was telling that I can go ahead do something called as a get content, and get content here means that just go ahead and read a file. That's it. File format, anything, .txt, .pdf, whatever it is, go ahead and read something out there. And what I'll do is I'll just get the content, or I'll just get the file path out here. So this is where I've stored my file. So I'll just go ahead, give this path out here, and I'll say this is just the path. I'm not, let's say, interested in reading the path. If I'm interested in reading the path, interested in reading the contents of the path, I would have done a get hyphen child item out here. But I'm now interested in reading the contents inside a file. So I'll do a forward slash, and I'll now say, okay, fine, this is a configuration.txt. And when I now execute this out, what it does is that it goes into that particular content, or if it goes into that particular path, goes into that particular file, and now displays all the contents of that particular file out here. Displays all the contents of this particular file out here. So the first thing that I wanted to see is that can I read a file? So you as a developer, you gave me a file. Can I read that particular file? Yes. Can I get the contents of the file? Certainly yes. But then can I go and create all the resources using these contents? Probably not. A reason being, this is a very primitive file called .txt. Now, see, .txt is easier. You can go and, let's say, easily write it out. No questions there. But it's not something that we use on a regular basis. Let's say when you come down to an IT industry out there, it's not something that is desirable to use. Reason being, this is something that I can go ahead and do a get content, find things out, and do a couple of things out there. But it is not really interactive for me. It is not that interactive, not that user friendly, not that interactive out here. Especially when I am, let's say, a DevOps engineer writing, let's say, some kind of a PowerShell script out here. Not that interactive. But a better alternative and widely used are called serialization syntaxes or serialization languages out there. What exactly is a serialization language? Very simple, like you and me talk in English, you understand English. That's the reason I go deliver, let's say, my lectures in English out there. In the same way, applications, like let's say you have a phone in your, let's say, home, and you also have, let's say, a printer at your home, and you can connect your phone to your printer, give commands like print or scan or all that stuff, right? So I'm now talking about applications, electronic applications. They use a common language to talk to each other, like XML, like something called JSON, like something called YAML. All these are common languages that an application can talk to each other. You and me, probably we won't be able to, let's say, understand that language that well, but an application can actually understand this out. So in my case, PowerShell is an application, and best way to let's say give an input to PowerShell is using a serialization content. And that is where I bring in something called as a JSON object, or that's where I bring in something called JSON out here. So instead of writing the same configuration in a text file, why don't I write it in JSON, so that not only will I read the file, not only will I get the content, but can I also go ahead grab that object inside the content? Meaning, can I go ahead grab the name and then create a, let's say, a storage account in the Azure portal, grab the name, create a container inside it, upload the file inside it, all these things? Definitely yes. And that's where JSON as a syntax or JSON as a language comes into picture. And JSON here stands for JavaScript object notation. So your question can be, do I need to know Java to, let's say, start my journey with JSON? Not at all. There is no relation between the language called Java and something called JSON object out here. it's completely different. So let's begin our journey with something called JSON. On how do you write it? How exactly that you store your configuration using something known as JSON, and how do you read it? If you write it, yes, great, but how do you read it? And how do I go ahead and create something using this particular language out here? Any questions before I can get started? Anyone, any questions before I can get started out here?
JSON is a PowerShell language.
No, JSON is not a PowerShell language. JSON is a different syntax. JSON, unlike PowerShell, is a different syntax out there.
Hey, Kiran, just curious. You called a .txt file, right? What will
hmm
happen if we call images or video .mp4
You can also do that. Let's say you can also call those out, but you would really not get any, let's say, content out there. So, for example, let's see if I have an image. So, just to give you an example out there, let's say I have multiple images called something like this. So, I'll just copy this one out. Say get hyphen content, which is let's say the basic command that I need to use out there. Let's say path, and I'll just go ahead and give the path of that particular image out there. If I just go ahead and execute this out, now it probably will not give me anything, but it's all a binary object, right? So what it's doing is that it's going ahead giving me everything in a binary format. Now PowerShell can read that image, meaning this image in a very programmatic language is written in binaries. So all these things is something that the system can really understand out there. So it potted down all these things. So when you look at image, it's nothing but a blob, right? It's a binary large object out here. So it's just going ahead, reading all the data of that particular image and then giving me this out. So you can do that, but not very beneficial. As you see, you cannot really understand what it's actually talking about out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Getting it?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions, guys, before we move forward?
Yes, sir.
Good, please.
So what are other file formats we can read in PowerShell? Like .txt?
Uh,
Are there any?
Yes, you can do, yes, definitely. You can, kind of read any other file formats, like let's say begin with .txt. You can also do a .pdf. You can do a .x, let's say XLS, meaning the Excel files out here. You can do a .csv. You can do a .xml. You can do a .yml, YAML. You can do a .json, and multiple things that are actually supported out here. So literally, you have all the file formats that you can actually read out here, but I am just focusing upon the ones that we use very majorly. We used to use something like Excels and CSVs out there earlier, but right now, most of, let's say, the projects that we are working with out there are either using JSON. XML is a little difficult. XML, let's say, is a little difficult to, let's say, grab a hold on. But JSON and YAML are being widely used out there to go ahead and, let's say, write and also to read that particular content out there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So the question then is that how do I write a JSON format? Because a text document was pretty much easier. I could have just went ahead. I just went ahead. I said, okay, fine. Give me a notepad, and I have written some configuration in a text document, and I was reading the same thing. So it's pretty much straightforward. Like we've been doing text documents since like ages, right? But unlike that, JSON follows a proper syntax, and I need an editor to write JSON. And that is where I bring in a software called VS Code, Visual Studio Code, which is one of the most widely used software, or which is one of the most versatile software that a DevOps engineer actually uses. We use Visual Studio Code for Azure, Azure DevOps, a lot of things out there. So it's a multi-purpose software that we go ahead and, let's say, download and install this out. Again, how do you install it out? How exactly it looks like? So the problem is that I already have my Visual Studio Code. Like this is how it looks like. I already have this installed. So to show you a demo, I just created myself a virtual machine, and we'll talk about what virtual machines are and all these things. But for now, just imagine that this is a brand new machine out here, and I'll just go and show you how to install this, and show you how to just get started with this out. So let me go here and let me get started with this one. Let me say start without syncing. Let me say continue without data. Confirm start browsing. Let's go here and I'll say in the Google search, just say download VS Code. Just type this command or just type this lines and telling download VS Code out here, and you would get something like this. So as and when you go here into this particular link, so again the link here is called code.visualstudio/download. If you want, I'll also go ahead and forward this out to you all. So this is the link that you get to go ahead and let's say download. And once you get this link, you now have let's say a screen asking you what kind of an operating system that you're working on. Is it Macintosh, or is it let's say Windows, or is it let's say Ubuntu, and etc. In my case, I have a Windows operating system. I'll just say download this out, and it says getting started, code in action, and all these things, and it'll download an exe file for you, which is around 80 MB and etc. So this is one of the softwares that let's say I would suggest you all to definitely install. This is something that we use a lot in the demos. We use a lot while we're working it out. So we'll understand how to use this in and out. I'll say yes. Let's go here, and once this is started, I'll say I accept the terms and conditions. Let's say next. Let's say next, and just go ahead do a very plain installation. Again, if you want to change the path of the installation, you can go ahead and change the path as well where you want to install this out. By default, it goes in and sets in something known as programs. You can as well change the path of the same thing. I'll say next, next, and I'll just go ahead and review and create this, or review and install this out here. So I now am reviewing all these things, installing this particular VS Code on my machine. And once this is installed, let me see how I can open this out, what I can do with this and all these things out here. So once this is done, I'll say launch Visual Studio. Again, a very simple piece of software, very simple installation, nothing to let's say worry about this one. And once you start this, the first thing it'll ask you is that what kind of a color you want this particular software to have. You can go for a light color, you can go for a dark contrast, you can go for all these colors that are available out there. I personally prefer let's say the dark because it lets me read a lot of things out there and etc. And what I want you all to do very beginning is that you have all these options called file, edit, and all these things out. Just click on file and just say open a folder, and just go into your documents and open one random folder out here. So let's say something like demo folder. I'll say select folder, and once I do this, this is the screen that you get telling that what do you want to trust this folder. I'll say yes, trust this folder. Click on this option and I'll say yes, trust this editor to start working with something called as Visual Studio out here. So this is the first thing that you do. So you go ahead install the software, and you go ahead configure the software. You go ahead choose your color for the software, and then go ahead and say what, I trust that particular folder. You will get a dialog box telling do you want to trust this out, and say trust this out. If you say no, you won't be able to use the software out there. So please go ahead and say please trust this out. And now I'll go ahead and start writing something out there. Now the writing part, I'll come back to my machine from the virtual machine. I'll just close this out. I'll come back to my machine to start writing this out, as I do have the Visual Studio software out here. So I'll go ahead again do the same thing. I'll say open my folder, and I'll just go ahead and open the folder that we're working on. I'll select folder and open this out here. Again, this folder has contents like the text file. You can also go and write your text files out here. But what I want to do is that I now want to write another file called configuration.json file. I want to use the same thing, development, RG, and all these stuff. I want to use the same thing out here, but I now want to start writing all these things or all the configuration in the form of a .json file. So what I'll do is that when I hover here, now this is the file system, this is the file explorer. When you click on this one, it'll tell you what are all the files inside the folder out there, inside which you can go ahead, say a new file, a new folder, you can do all these things out here. So I'll say a new file, and I'll start typing and calling this as a config.json. The extension for it is JSON file that I'm writing right now, and I'll say enter. As in when I do this, it will come in the form of let's say something like the yellow color braces out there, and it'll tell that okay fine, you're all good to start writing something known as a JSON file. Now when you want to write a JSON, it, as I said, follows a particular syntax. Syntax out here, which starts with an open bracket, closes with a close bracket out here. So inside the flower brackets, whatever you write is called as a JSON object. So let's write that out. How do I start with my journey again with JSON? I'll just open the bracket, as in when I did an open bracket out here, Visual Studio automatically identified that, okay, fine, this is a JSON object. So you would also want to, let's say, go ahead and close the bracket out there. So I am opening the braces, closing the braces, and inside this, between that particular open and close bracket, now this is where I want to, let's say, start writing my configuration like the team name. So let's go ahead. I'll say team colon, I'll say development. Now, if you look at this, as in when I wrote it, it's giving me some kind of an error. And if I hover on top of it, it's telling property must be double quoted and all these things out here. It's a JSON property. You cannot just declare it right away and all these things. So the thing here is that JSON follows a syntax called key value pairs. A key and a value pair out here. Guys, can you please go on mute if you're not already on? I am getting some kind of a disturbance out here. Okay, I'll just put everyone on mute and we'll take questions and I'll do that. Let's do this. Great. So JSON now follows something called as a key value pair syntax. Key and value. When I say key value, the team name can become the key and the value here can be development. In here, this is the key and this is the value. And both must be encapsulated in double quotes. That is how a JSON treats its objects out there. So you cannot just go ahead and write it like the way you write a text file. When you want to give a key, I'll say key, and this is the value of that particular key. The key is always represented in a blue color. The value here is represented in, let's say, a darkish orange color out there, telling this is the key value pair out here. And so let me go ahead and in the place of key, let me say it is a team name, and let me say this is development. So key value pairs separated by a colon. This is how I go ahead and represent my JSON object. And this is the first thing called team name. I would also want to go ahead and store something called as the RG name out here, right? So if I want to write another key value pair, I'll do a comma, enter, again give a key value pair called RG name, colon, dev hyphen RG. So it is multiple key value pairs separated by commas out here. Let's say storage account name. And I will say this is dev storage ABC XYZ JSON USEs to something like this so that the name can be unique. So I'm placing that particular storage account name out here. And after this, I can say container name and I can say container one. This is all something called as strings. So I'm doing a key value pair in the form of a string. If you want to give a number, I can also go ahead and represent an integer. If you want to give a boolean, which is true or false, I can also go ahead and give something called as a boolean out here, true, false out here without the quotes. So I can do multiple things like numbers, booleans, and all these things out here. Something created as false and all that stuff. So